For years, artificial intelligence has been making scientific discoveries with a pretty severe handicap. It's basically been operating completely blindfolded. Welcome to this explainer on the OmniScientist. We're diving into an AI framework today that fundamentally changes how machines conduct empirical research. We're talking about a system that finally moves beyond just reading text and crunching prepackaged numbers to actually perceiving the raw, messy reality of scientific data. It's a total game changer.
To make sense of this massive breakthrough, here is our roadmap. 1. The AI scientist blind spot. 2. Meet the OmniScientist. 3. The three-stage research engine. 4. Guardrails and fact-checking. 5. Seeing data in action. And we'll wrap up with 6. A new era of discovery.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the AI scientist's blind spot.
Imagine, if you will, a genius detective. But there's a catch. This detective never actually visits the crime scene. They only read the polished police reports summarizing the evidence. Well, this is exactly how current AI scientists work. They are incredibly smart, no doubt about it, but they are completely insulated from the raw evidence itself.
So the crucial point here is that when we force data into textual captions or simple numbers, the AI becomes completely blind to the native structural cues that are naturally hidden in raw evidence. Think about it. If you feed an AI a pre-computed feature vector, which is basically just a simplified mathematical summary chosen by humans, it entirely loses the local spatial structure of a pathology slide or the temporal ordering of a bird's migration track. All of those vital procedural, cross-channel, and spatial relationships, they just vanish into thin air.
And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the divide. Relying on human-chosen numerical representations severely narrows the kinds of research questions an AI can even think to ask, especially when you compare it to an AI that can directly perceive raw data. The authors of the study hit the nail on the head when they note that existing systems are workflow complete but evidence incomplete. That is a massive takeaway for us. The decisive issue isn't what data can be serialized into text, it's about which relationships actually survive the interface.
Which brings us to Section 2, Meet the OmniScientist.
Okay, this diagram is the absolute heart of the entire framework, so we're going to unpack it thoroughly. Over on the far left, you have the observed world. Just look at the sheer variety of data it's pulling in across completely distinct visual pathways. We've got galaxies and pathology slides categorized under images, seismic and Raman waveforms under signals, bird songs under audio, CAD parts under 3D, cell time lapses under videos, cyclone tracks under trajectories, and even raw tables and symbols. Now, all of this raw evidence feeds directly into that massive block in the center, the unified scientific engine. Notice the central hub inside this block? That's the omni-modality engine, represented by the red circle. And it's surrounded by this continuous operational loop of perceive, hypothesis, experiment, report, and feedback. This engine doesn't just passively look at data, it interacts with an automated code execution environment to run real experiments and a literature search module to check existing knowledge. It's one unified architecture handling all these domains, completely agnostic to the discipline. Finally, following those arrows to the right, it outputs scientific results. Here we see actual, verified discoveries laid out visually, like identifying that 21.7% of noise-labeled seismic traces actually carry real bursts, or that a specific shape structure can group 1,500 parts without any supervision whatsoever. The AI observed the raw data, tested its hypotheses in the loop, and generated those proven outcomes. It's literally doing science.
OmniScientist organizes all this incredible data into these 4 discipline-independent families. And this is a massive shift, guys. It means the exact same engine can analyze a 3D CAD mesh, a birdsong, or a DNA sequence without needing new domain-specific code. If you want to add a new discipline to the AI, you don't rewrite the system. You just give it a single new specification file. It just seamlessly operates across perceptual, symbolic, quantitative, and procedural evidence.
Let's move on to Section 3, the three-stage research engine.
The system relies on a continuous cycle of observing, thinking, and acting, what we call a react loop, short for reasoning and acting. This happens across 3 incredibly precise stages, constantly using its perception to guide its decisions. During ideation, it doesn't just throw out blind guesses. It grounds itself by inspecting raw materials and searching literature databases, like OpenAlex, to propose novel, falsifiable questions. Then, in the experiment stage, it autonomously writes and executes its own code, debugging errors on the fly. Finally, in write-up, it builds the manuscript based strictly on what was actually proven in the lab.
This leads right into Section 4, guardrails and fact-checking.
Because AI models can, well, sometimes invent facts, a system this autonomous requires incredible guardrails. And looking at this two-stage verification pipeline, it is beautifully strict. Starting on the left side of the diagram, we have an unverified experimental result. This result is immediately forced through the rigor check, which you can see in the green box. This is a hard, code-enforced check. It demands proof of real code execution, accounts for all tests to prevent any statistical manipulation, checks for data leakage, and makes sure the headline finding actually comes from supported analyses. If, and only if it successfully passes through that green box, it officially becomes a verified result, moving further right to the claim check in the red box. Here, every single reported number and claim in the final manuscript is mathematically matched back to recorded outputs. Now, I want you to notice the blue box at the absolute bottom of the figure, the execution record. This is the foundational source of truth for the entire right side of this diagram. It tracks every single byte of data loaded, every line of standard output, and every single attempted test, even the failures. The AI absolutely cannot report a number in that final document that doesn't perfectly match the execution trace in that blue box. No hallucinations allowed.
So what happens if the AI just tries to run test after test until it magically finds a positive result? Well, the system steps in and enforces a strict multiple comparison correction over every single test it attempted. If the AI tries to fake an experiment, these deterministic triggers immediately reject the action. For instance, if the dataset isn't physically loaded from the disk, that triggers a hard anti-fabrication rejection. Any unverified claims are forcefully excluded from the manuscript, sending the system straight back to the drawing board and ensuring complete numerical traceability.
Let's see this in practice. Section 5. Seeing data in action.
In this seismology study, the AI audited about 1,500 broadband seismograms. Now, a blind, text-only AI would just read the text label noise and move on to the next file. But the OmniScientist actually looked at the waveform morphology shown right here. In the detailed charts on the left, you can clearly see the AI spotted a coherent onset and decay envelope, basically a distinct burst of energy right exactly at the dashed red vertical line. Remember, this trace was explicitly labeled by human experts as noise. The AI noticed this unexpected physical structure, formulated a hypothesis on its own, and executed a test that proved 21.7% of those noise labels in the entire dataset were actually real seismic events. This means decades of human-labeled baseline data might actually be flawed, and the AI proved it simply by looking directly at the shape of the wave. Mind-blowing, right? And this visually reinforces its incredible versatility. On the left, we're looking at biology, a histopathology slide. The AI directly observed the heterogeneous cellular textures and multiple tissue patterns to guide its clustering, rather than relying on some basic text summary. Now, jump over to the right side, and suddenly we are in the realm of engineering, a 3D CAD model. By actively perceiving the principal axes and latent shape structures, meaning the actual surfaces and voids, the exact same AI engine was able to group 1,500 mechanical parts into distinct morphotypes without any human-provided labels. Perception is actively dictating the discovery across entirely unrelated disciplines here. Let's examine this medical breakthrough. The AI was tasked with analyzing pediatric chest X-rays to distinguish normal lungs from pneumonic ones. The OmniScientist didn't just look at raw flat pixel intensities, it actually observed the spatial patchiness. It computed a sliding window local entropy to map out the physical variance in the tissue, which you can see highlighted in the blue heat maps overlaying the lungs. Now look closely at the evaluation chart on the right. A blind baseline looking only at raw pixels scored an accuracy score, an AUC, of 0.634. But by measuring this visual patchiness, the AI jumped its accuracy score all the way up to a massive 0.851. It discovered a structural pattern that outperformed blind baselines by a huge margin.
Bringing us to Section 6, a new era of discovery.
This evaluation heat map is incredibly telling because it directly compares different underlying AI models against human expert judges across a rigorous 36-case suite. The scale goes from 0 to 10, and those darker blue squares represent significantly higher performance. On the vertical axis, you see the various model backbones being tested, like Sonnet 3.5, GLM4V, and your standard text-only baselines further down. Across the horizontal axis, you have the evaluation metrics, multimodal grounding, scientific significance, innovation, and factual accuracy. When evaluated, the perception-driven system sitting at the top showed massive quality gains. Specifically, the researchers documented a plus 2.8 improvement in multimodal grounding and a plus 1.8 gain in scientific significance over the traditional text-only systems lower down on the chart. And really notice that far-right column detailing factual accuracy. The dark blue squares highlight that accuracy remains exceptionally high for the top models, often hitting 7.7 or 8.0 out of 10. So the system is generating highly significant, well-grounded discoveries without hallucinating the facts.
In fact, when put in direct head-to-head comparisons, the OmniScientist won a staggering 85% of the time against the blind variant that relied only on pre-computed data. The blind baseline was constantly forced to guess or design studies based on data fields that didn't even exist, which required massive replanning. Meanwhile, the OmniScientist just looked at the data and immediately knew what to test.
The key takeaway for us today is captured perfectly by this quote from the researchers: "Perception is where discovery begins." Observation isn't just a neat little side feature or a parlor trick. Directly looking at the raw, messy reality of spatial, temporal, and structural data is the very foundation of empirical research. You simply cannot make new discoveries if you can't even see the anomalies sitting right in front of you.
As we unleash AI scientists that can truly see, hear, and structurally map the universe across every scientific discipline, from the depths of the ocean to the furthest galaxies, the possibilities for novel discoveries are quite literally boundless. We are rapidly moving from AI that just reads about science to AI that actually does it. The next major medical cure or astronomical breakthrough might not come from an AI that read a textbook, but from one that finally looked through a microscope. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes open for what these systems discover next.